Welcome, welcome. Grab a chair, get some coffee. We have 2 biscuits. That's it. Have to share.
Just two? All right. Waiting for a few more people to start up, and we'll get in here. Oh, we got a good turnout so far. All right.
Thanks for coming, everybody.
Yeah. All right. Welcome, everyone, to PhotoCare's webinar in collaboration with Sigma. My name is Manny Tejeda. Today, we are joined by Sigma Tech Rep Mark Farb and Sigma Cinema Ambassador Graham Sheldon. Today, we will be going over the Sigma FP mirrorless cinema camera. Quite frankly, one of the most unique cameras on the market. Recently, there was a massive 2.0 firmware update. We will be going over the new features and how it will impact your workflow. Please ask all questions in the Q&A portal to make sure that we can answer them in a timely manner. Whatever we cannot answer during the presentation will be answered at the end. With time permitting, we will give a few minutes for Q&A. Myself and Mark will answer as soon as possible. Now, with that out of the way, please let me introduce you to the main attraction. Emmy Award winner Graham Sheldon resides in Southern California, USA, where he works as a producer and director of photography. Throughout his career, Sheldon has produced and shot scripted, topical, and historical documentary projects on 6 continents. Graham's past work includes projects for NBC, Vice, Disney, Dell, Ubisoft, BBC, TLC, ITV, Discovery, PepsiCo, and the list goes on. And with that being said, welcome, Graham.
Hey, Manny. Thanks for having me. This is awesome. I'm excited to get to talk about the FP for a little bit here. So, I mean, Manny sort of introed me a little bit there. I just finished up my 5th feature film prior to the pandemic happening. It's a thriller shot out in Indiana called So Cold the River. And I used the FP as a director viewfinder mode on that project. But as Manny alluded to, you know, I've been lucky enough to work all over the world when we were allowed to travel. It
was like so long ago.
I know it feels like a long time, but during the strange quarantine period that we've been in, I've been trying to sort of make the most of it. So, Mark, maybe a good spot to start is you could play that shoe commercial video. It's called dancingmerino.mp4, just so people can get a sense of that. So, you know, while he's queuing that up, I, like all of you, was told to sort of stay at home and hunker in place. And I had all of these commercials and projects on the books. So my wife and I took the Sigma FP and the 45mm contemporary kit lens that's bundled with it, and shot a commercial basically in our backyard starring each other. So it's called Dancing Merino, Mark. I don't know if you see that. I could also share my screen.
I just have video 1 and 2. So
that's all right. Then let me cue it up right here. I'm going to share my screen and kick you out.
Okay.
Right here. So there is music with this. I don't know if you can hear music in your end, guys. Can you?
We do not.
Okay, no worries. So this is just some shots that's my wife dancing there. I have no on-camera abilities, but these are my feet here as well. And this was sort of our thing to do during the pandemic, to be quite honest. And this was broadcast a bunch of different places, part of a digital ad buy. And, you know, it's kind of telling to me that one of the first things I did when we learned we, couldn't go outside is I reached for this tiny, but mighty little camera called the Sigma FP. So this is under a pound. It's actually 0.46 of a pound. Full frame, mirrorless, shoots cinema DNG raw, 12-bit files. And then it also shoots other flavors as well, including .mov. And actually, with a new firmware update that we'll get into a little bit later, it shoots all sorts of other flavors with the help of a few third parties. So, I mean, it's a really amazing little camera. And with firmware 2.0 that I'll dive into in a second, really unlocked just a ton of stuff. So this is the camera right here. Variety of different accessories, but you can kind of tell it's a little buried here in this cage. But you can kind of tell, I mean, just the form factor right? Incredibly small. Of course, you got, you know, full frame sensor. And actually, this is the 45 millimeter contemporary that I just took off there. But I mean, you can see the sensor right there. L mount.
Hey, let's just start. Mark, can you stop sharing your screen for a second so we can actually see Graham's screen larger?
Smart. Yeah, cool.
There you go.
So here it is right here. That's that full frame L mount. Everyone out there can see it.
Yes.
So the L mount Alliance is one of the cooler things to happen over the last few years, honestly, in optics. So you can use Leica, Panasonic, and then of course Sigma makes a ton of L glass here, and all fits right on the camera. So I don't know, you know, what kind of glass you guys have at home. I have a ton of PL glass, being a Cine person. I also have a ton of EF glass coming out of the Canon world. So Sigma makes an adapter called the MC21 that allows for the use of EF glass. And then the MC31, which is actually brand new, just started shipping, allows for the use of PL glass. So as I said before, I just came off this thriller in Indiana. Our camera package was 50 pounds. And part of the ability to communicate with the rest of the team and keep morale high is walking around and using the director's viewfinder mode in the FP, which allows you to see the aspect ratio that you're shooting. It's friendly with a few different brands, including Red, Sony, and Arri, I believe, to name a few. So it helps you use the actual glass that you need to on the camera, which is obviously very important for me as a professional cinematographer as well. Let's see here.
Yeah, it must be convenient to be able to switch from like a Red to an RE to the Sigma FP for a crash cam. Same lenses, same matte boxes.
Yeah, because I mean, there are other options out there when it comes to directors' viewfinders that are all sort of programmatic, right? They're on your phone, they're different types of apps, and you can't actually see what you're shooting. So they're in terms of using the real glass and getting a sense of what the image is going to be. So that's absolutely one of my favorite features out of the Sigma FP. And then, you know, Manny, you brought up sort of crash cam mode. I'm going to share a photo right now. So this is sort of a Sigma FP rigged up in sort of cine mode. I mean, the first thing I do, right, as a cinematographer is completely not obey all the lovely minimalist design of the FP and throw as many accessories on as possible. But this is the Sigma FP being used on a project for Warner Brothers and Legendary, where we were basically comparing Terminator and RoboCop. And as part of this comparison for this digital series we did, we had to use a flamethrower. And I would much rather put a camera that is comparatively more affordable. I think you guys, Manny, tell me if I'm wrong, the price point's about $1,800.
Yeah, it's $1,800.
Right? Yeah, so $1,800. So if you're going to pick something to put next to a flamethrower, personally, I would put a Sigma FP, not only because you're getting an incredible image out of it, but also because the repercussions for this ball of flame hitting your $40,000 body a little bit less. So this is actually a GIF, and the wide shot's pretty cool too.
Yeah, and that's a pretty unique mode for the Sigma FP, the Cinemagraph mode, correct?
Yeah, that's a great point. Let's dive into, here's a quick Cinemagraph, another in-camera feature of the Sigma FP. So I am not a Cinemagraph person, at least I wasn't prior to firmware 2.0. It's all done in camera.
Yeah, before you would have to hire a DP, then an animator to do it, and a lot of like fashion and e-com clients suddenly want Cinemagraphs, and do it at this quality level on a camera so inexpensive. That's mind blowing.
Well, and it's another feature that you can offer clients. You know what I mean? So this is all done through I want to really emphasize that, by me just touching the back of the camera, and setting basically bounce to on, and then me picking which part of the image I want to move and which part I want to keep still. This is a friend of mine, Thea. You notice how the sparks in her glasses aren't moving. So yeah, that's one of my favorite features out of firmware 2.0. But just talking a little bit more about the camera in general, there's over 40 points of weather sealing, a aluminum body. I believe there's another alloy mixed in there as well. So, you know, I wouldn't drive a car over it, but on the spectrum of destructibility, this is one of the best in terms of being able to survive whatever we throw at it when we're working on our shows. Really, really easy menu to navigate. There's buttons at the top. And I'll show some of these now. It's a little buried in this protective cage I have on it. You can see it right there.
Makes that is that 8 cent?
Yeah, this is 8 Sin. Do you guys carry 8 Sin?
We don't, but we can find something.
Yeah. Okay, Manny can hook you up. So just switch back and forth between Cine and still mode, and it just changes the UI in the menu on the back, which is actually a principle that you started seeing in video games about 10 years ago, is dynamically seeing how the UI is changing based on what the user is doing. So it's actually something really, really cool. So you see shutter angle when you're in the Cine side, you don't when you're on the still side, little things like that. So Mark, I just started talking about the Cine stuff here without giving the still side its due. What are your favorite features out of the FP on the still side?
I mean, I'm still experimenting heavily with it because, again, it is a mirrorless camera, so the focus system is definitely different than a traditional DSLR, but there are some neat points in there. It's very attractive because of its size, as you said. I've taken it out on the motocross track. I've actually experimented in some really abysmal situations with light. So the fact that I can actually push ISOs to 100,000 and start at ISO 6. So, you know, a 6 to 30-second exposure looks like daylight, which I did some stuff down in Brooklyn a couple of nights ago, which was like, wow. Being able to push the ISOs really high and they're clean. I mean, wicked clean is amazing to me. It has a high frame rate. So as a guy who does a lot of action work, that's important. So I can shoot DNGs, I can shoot JPEGs, you know, editing wise, I can bounce between different formats. It's nice. You know, while the MC21 allows me to put on 60 different lenses immediately. So whether I'm shooting with a fisheye or going out to 800 millimeters, I can accessorize it any which way I see, or jump back on the other side and throw a Cine lens on there and do everything, you know, manual. So I can incorporate a lot of different things, which is kind of neat, and I'm having a little bit of fun with it.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I've said this before, but the only camera that kind of matters is the one that you take out into the field, right?
Yeah.
And as I've gotten a little bit older, it becomes a decision, right? Am I going to hurt my body by carrying this large camera body out the door, or am I going to grab something more like the FP, really easy decision, and then go out in the field and you're ready to go, especially with something like the 45 millimeter contemporary. I mean, this is not a big lens.
Yeah, I'm still blown away by how many features you were able to put in such a small yet robust body. Like when I saw it at PP last year, like I held it in my hands, I was like, this is a tank, but it's so small and so light. Like it's dense. Is that because of the magnesium reinforcement inside of it? Is also part of the L mount, which has 4 flanges.
Yeah, well, I mean, I can attest to the indestructible side. I mean, you know, I was taking it into Indiana winter, like December, January. I mean, it never stopped cooking the entire time. I mean, we were getting snowed on. You wouldn't want to like directly put it in water, right? I'm not saying it's waterproof, but things like snow, light rain, it absolutely can tackle all of those things. Mark, I don't know. Have you been bringing it out into the elements?
I've actually got caught out on the racetrack with it in the rain. So well, we're out there, and all of a sudden, the weather just moved in out of nowhere. So, you know, lovely New Jersey can do that to you. And I tell you what, it didn't skip a beat. I kept on shooting, and actually, the motocrossers didn't want to get off the track until there was a bolt of lightning. So, you know, and again, holding a nice chunk of metal in my hands, it was just like, yeah, I need to get off the track now. Yeah, no issues whatsoever.
Well, why don't I pull up the graph here that shows some of the recording modes, because from the cinematography side, this is one of the things that's particularly exciting for me. So If you've never had a chance to play with Cinema DNG RAW files, you'd probably be using something like DaVinci to edit the Cinema DNG files in post. But I mean, this is just an easy way to see sort of the bit rate that you're shooting. You mean you have all flavors of UHD and full HD here. And one of the more exciting things to me personally about firmware 2.0 is the addition of 10-bit. It's kind of buried in the middle there, but if you see full HD, 10-bit, 120 frames per second for like $1,800 for the body. I mean, I don't know of other cameras that are you're checking the boxes, right? Full frame, 120 frames per second, full RAW up to 10-bit. I mean, it starts kind of putting it in a category of its own.
And I love that you have in that supported media slide, you actually show SSD.
Yes.
That's another unique feature. Not many cameras have that.
Yeah, so you can do a few different things. So on the graph, I mean, you can record to UHS-2 memory cards. So
they're inexpensive, but not the most robust cards.
Yeah, exactly. Or personally, I use Samsung T5 drives. There are a few other compatible drives out there, but the Samsung T5 in particular is incredibly small. There's a lot of third-party mounts that are made, so you can just put the drive into a cold shoe and you're good to go.
Part of a cage, there's like a loop that can attach.
Yeah, there's a few different brands that make similar versions of that. But I mean, the big takeaway there is you have USB-C, you take all your media, you plug it into your computer, and if you want, you can edit off that drive as well. Yeah. Depends, of course, how much you're shooting. But I actually really like the SSD form of media.
For a lot of running gun, it's cheap, durable. It just works, especially if you're like doing post-production on the road.
Yeah.
Edit from a laptop, it's fantastic.
Exactly. And I don't know if any of you saw the bit rates we were recording at Cinema DNG. And if you spend a little time and do a little math, you can figure out that we are really crunching some gigabytes. So of course, there is .mov. And I'll share a little clip here I have that is .mov right here. So this is some sort of like handheld dock sort of feeling stuff. I think this is a 24-70 2.8 art. And this is an EF lens. And the color mode, you might notice it's a little flat here. So this is color mode off, which is admittedly not true log, but this is a pretty darn flat image that you're getting right out of the camera. So why is that important?
It looks amazing.
You want to be able to grade. And actually, I was filming paint here specifically because I'm like, someone's going to take this file and then grade it some way and really bring out the saturation, really bring out those colors if they want to. So again, this is a .mov file. So this isn't Cinema DNG. This isn't destroying gently over time all your hard drives. It is a very, very, very tiny file. In fact, I'll stop sharing my screen here and just see how long that clip is, or how large rather. So yeah, that's 111 megabytes, and it goes on for another little bit there. And that's a full HD file. And so if you are just running around, you might maybe want to do .mov perhaps.
How did you have it rigged up for that shot? Was it on that little 8-sin cage with the top handle?
Yeah, exactly.
That, right?
So I was using the 8-sin cage. I think I just handheld it the entire time. The IS worked on my 24-70 art, which I know you guys carry. And the image stabilization helped me out a little bit, and it went fine.
Perfect.
Hey Graham, being that you're talking about some of the points in there, how about talk about dual ISO for a second?
Yes, I actually brought a graph for this too, for you visual folks.
Ooh, graphs.
Yeah, ooh, graphs. You know, this is the kind of nerdy stuff that makes us very excited. So, what are you looking at? So that line is middle gray. That kind of goes through the middle. And then you're seeing above and below how many stops of dynamic range you have at different ISO settings with the Sigma FP. And with the recent firmware 2.0 update, I know we keep bringing this up, but it kind of changed the entire camera. So if you hear us touch on it a little bit more over the next 30 or so, 40 minutes, it's because it's a huge, huge update. So at the bottom, you see all the different ISO settings. And this chart is telling us a couple of different things, but the big one is that at 100 ISO and at 3200 ISO, we're getting the cleanest image. Are we getting the most dynamic range? Not necessarily. If you want the most dynamic range, I would still keep between 100 and 800 ISO when shooting on the FP. But the ability to get a clean image, maybe not with the most possible dynamic range, at 3200 ISO is very important. And when you see a chart like this as a cinematographer, you start to understand some of the decisions that are possible when you're in the field, right? Maybe the light's going away, you don't have continuous lighting, whatever it is. You can start making decisions. You know, it's not a very high dynamic range environment anyway. It's a night shoot, whatever it is. You can go to 3200, not feel bad about losing a smidgen dynamic range. And you can feel good about going to 100 ISO as well, if the inverse is true. So the point is, you now have decisions to make and greater flexibility. So, you know, you don't have to toggle anything in the camera, just go to 100 ISO, just go to 3200 ISO, and this automatically works. It's not something you need to toggle on and off like other camera bodies out there. Stop sharing that.
So now that you have dynamic range and those ISO values, do you feel yourself having to run for a variable ND as more often or less?
As a cinematographer, to get to 24 frames per second with a shutter for you photo guys around 1/48, I tend to still use ND a lot, honestly, because I'm always trying to shoot at 2.8 at like noon in the desert east of Los Angeles. So, I mean, ND is a big part of my workflow, but getting to go to ISO 100, obviously, very, very
Fantastic,
important. Yeah. As a photographer, too, Mark, I don't know if you...
Yeah, no, I would agree completely. As a matter of fact, actually, I was just working with a set of ND filters with the 1424 on the FP, which they're actually made by Tejeda, and they drop right in the back, and it's amazing. You know, to have basically a variation of like 8 stops between the 4 filters. Again, you know, certain things just require it. Like when I do aviation, I want my blue sky, but I want to shoot at a 40th of a second. So there's only one way to do that, and I don't want to have to stop down to f22. So, you know, ND filters are the only way to do it.
Yeah, I mean, there's... Oh, yeah, man.
Yeah, I had a question from both of you, actually. So using the FP full frame camera, what happened? You have small camera, full frame, but you also have this excellent set of crop sensor lenses, the DC lenses. What happens when you attach that to this camera?
I mean, in short, it dynamically changes. You just turn on, I think, what's it called in the menu, Mark? Super 35 mode or something like that. And you can set it to auto, and it will detect that.
Auto? Okay.
Yeah, it actually by default it's turned on by default, and you can bounce back and forth. So for argument's sake, and like when I teach concert photography stuff, I talk about putting a crop sensor lens on a full frame body that shoots 14 frames a second, because I'm crawling into the drum kit, and I want the drummer, and I want to drag my shutter on the darkest corner of the stage, but I want 14 frames a second, so I'm getting full motion on the sticks. So, you know, there are times that you want that T2 lens, or you want the f1.8 lens, and well, it's available in a Super 35 format or in the APS-C format, and you're kind of bouncing between those two worlds.
And if you like vintage glass too, I mean, that's another, yeah, I mean, this is quite a large sensor, so you don't have to kind of worry about getting full coverage when it comes to the sensor. I do want to talk, Manny, if you don't mind, about some of the other accessory options with the Sigma FP. This is actually one of my favorites right here. This is the Sigma LCD Viewfinder LVF 11. So if it's not up on the PhotoCare website, it will be soon, and you can reach out to them either way. So this affixes right to the back of the LCD here. And if you've ever worked with a viewfinder in this same sort of segment, they wiggle, right? They wiggle right here at this point. This is one of the few viewfinders that I've ever worked with that never actually wiggles, which has just been a dream come true, especially from Sigma, from the manufacturer. And it's not some, you know, genius in a garage that figured it out after 5 years. So this is a first-party accessory that's available for the camera. That's excellent, and not just excellent, one of the best I've ever used.
Yeah, I'm used to working with, like, you know, the older Canon 5Ds, the Zacuto viewfinders, and it felt janky. To be honest,
Well, I wasn't going to name the brand, Manny, but
I can. It worked for a while because that was the only thing available, but I'm glad a first-party manufacturer came along and perfected it.
Yeah, me too, absolutely. So if you are a cinematographer, I mean, obviously hit us with your questions below in the Q&A section, but power is always a thing that we care about, right? Because when you're building a camera rig, you need to attach a couple of different things. You're probably looking at a wireless transmitter from, somebody like Tejeda or Vaxis or Hollyland. There's a few out there right now. And you're going to want to do something like D-tap to 2-pin LEMO. In terms of follow focus, I prefer my AC pulling focus for me, on bigger things especially, because often with my sort of director, producer, hyphen with the DP thing, often I'm stuck in that role too of communicating directly with the talent and really looking at a macro level. And when I'm not worrying about focus, that lets part of my brain worry about other things. So to power all of this stuff, you need some type of D-tap out. So there's a few different brands out there that are making rigs that I think work very well for the FP. Zacuto is one of them. They have a new mirrorless system that they just came out with. They also, I think it's called an Arca. They also have another good base plate as well that really works with this body. So that's kind of where you want to start when you're building out the FP for really true high-end cinema applications. You want to get a base plate. You want to get your, I would argue, 15 millimeter rods in there, because when you're using 19, like, what are you doing with the camera this size? Remember, try to obey the minimalism whenever you can. Easier said than done. You're going to want your matte box on there, potentially to sort of handle flares, put in any sort of diffusion filtration that you might want for whatever the project is. That requires a little bit of a kit. And one of the really cool things has been to see the FP just be absolutely embraced by accessory manufacturers out there. I mean, Wooden Camera has solutions, 8sin has solutions, Zacuto has solutions that are just fantastic. And in terms of power out, I mean, you just get a back plate that takes gold mount or V mount. You slide that right on your 15 millimeter rails at the back of the FP, and suddenly you're powering all of your accessories. Sigma also makes a dummy battery that I don't want to blaze past as well. And this is one of those things where, like, look, I should have done a technical test on how long a 98 watt-hour battery powers the FP, but it's almost like after a couple hours, I'm like, yeah, it's okay, it lasts all day, fine.
Yes.
So it just lasts hours and hours and hours when you're talking about that much power. And
especially now with these V-mount and gold mount batteries getting so small. 98 watt hours, it's almost like nothing. Like the power, like the Core SWX Power Base Edge goes right on the bottom of the camera. You don't even need to rig it up.
Well, Manny, I'll tell you what. When I first got the FP and I got the dummy battery, I didn't have a V-mount battery handy, so I was carrying something like this that weighs about 4 pounds.
What's that? Is that a Vagabond?
No, this is actually a photogenic ion.
Oh, okay. We've had those before.
2 household plugs and my USB connector. I mean, this was my power out in the field when I needed to do stuff. I'd run printers, copiers, my laptop, whatever. But again, like Graham said, when you need to be, small and be able to be nimble and move quickly, you're not moving quickly with this. I find that I've got this along with a bunch of other things on my belt, and suddenly I've got 30 pounds of junk, on my waist. So it's nice to have smaller options now.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, there's 45 watt-hour batteries now. I know Bebob makes those as well. And of course, these are obviously a little hard to power accessories off of the in-camera battery, but this is great too. It lasts, I mean,
like 45 minutes to an hour. Yeah.
Absolutely. Depending on what you're doing with it.
Of course.
So gentlemen, if you don't mind, I think we should talk about color a little bit, because this is one of the cooler parts of the FP. You already saw a clip I showed earlier of color mode off, right? And maybe there's some other questions that'll pop up about specifically how that works. But I want to show, actually, Mark, why don't, if you don't mind, maybe you can share screen and just kind of go through a couple of the images I sent over one at a time, and then I can kind of talk how I was using the in-camera color, which is admittedly sometimes a scary word for professional users out there, right? Okay, so here's a big decision. This is a 35 millimeter Sigma Classic. So that's why you're getting those flare characteristics. This is teal and orange mode, set to +3. The backlights are on the roof. Those are set to urban sodium, which, well, not set. I just put gels in front of them, or rather the gaffer team did. So that's already kind of in the orange urban.
Oh, you went full music video mode.
Yeah, you know, I'm just like, I want flares. I want everything. I just want big, bold colors. So this is the wildest I get, honestly, with teal and orange mode. I think it goes up +4, +5 on the orange side, and then you could go -4, 5 on the teal side. But this is like TNO +3. So really cool flares with the classics. I hope you guys carry a set of those someday, because those are one of my new favorite things. So Mark, maybe you can pop to the next one.
Second.
Any image with color on it. Yeah, cool. This is color mode off. And I kind of just want to leave this image like this because I just really enjoy how it looks. But this is Thea, my welder airless friend. So check out Thea Ulrich on Instagram because her work is just absolutely spectacular. And from a lighting perspective, we're doing a few different things here. There are actually 3 lights, camera left, because you may know this if you're a cinematographer already, but you need to light to make movie dark, right? Sensors need light. So this looks like nighttime. If you're watching a movie, this is nighttime, but there's probably 15 different lights being used here. Everything from aperture novas to Forzas from Nanlite up on the roof.
Oh, wow.
There's a Sky Panel S60 keying her from just right next to camera right. And then you do the thing, you put water all over the ground to get those specular highlights out of my Ford SUV, which is humbly parked in the background. But this is camera mode off. So I took this out of the camera. This is a JPEG. This isn't a RAW. And I'm showing it to you guys here. In terms of lenses, I bet I was on like an 85 Cine Prime, again in EF, using that MC21 adapter that I've already spoken about a couple times. So
now, Graham, I'm going to ask you a question here. So when you were recording, you were actually recording in D&G RAW, correct?
For this one, this is either a straight up still, Mark. To be honest with you, I don't remember, but a few of the stills you're going to see, I think that last still was a Cine D&G still pulled out of a video file.
Okay,
so that's
what I was going for next, is that the fact that you can pull the stills out, and then when you open up the folder, you know, whatever your frame rate is, you've got, you know, that many D&Gs per second as what you're shooting.
Exactly. Like, so you're shooting 24 frames a second. You have, you know, in a second you have 24 cinema D&G stills that you can pull out, throw into, you know, Lightroom, whatever it is you're doing, and hand those images off. Actually, the image workflow, just taking images straight out of video, I like, because often I have the network, I have producers that are on set, I have executive producers that are on set, I have all these stakeholders, and I'm always trying to tell everyone what a cool thing we're making in whatever location we are, and I can never really do that without a lot of work back at the hotel or what have you. So I like the ability to pull a JPEG or a Cine D&G right out of the camera. It's also good because you can now do that in director's viewfinder mode. So you can walk around set, again, seeing that aspect ratio that might be out of your A-cam or whatever that is at the time. That's an approximation of that, which with your actual glass, you take those images and you say, hey, art department, or hey, director, whatever it is. For example, should we water down this pavement? That required a little bit of planning on our side. And I can more easily communicate with my team, sharing these JPEGs, sharing these Cine D&Gs, and using director's mode in general.
Speaking of workflow and software, when you're pulling the Cinema D&G file out, are you taking that out in DaVinci, or are you taking that on Premiere? Any proprietary
DaVinci
software?
Yeah, so okay. You have sort of a wide spectrum of ways that you can handle these things. Mark, if you don't mind not sharing the screen just for a hot second, and then we can go back into a few more stills. Essentially, you have your .mov files, which, as we all know, every NLE on the planet can handle fine. I mean, anything, iMovie, right? So that's a decision to make too. If you're a YouTuber, if you're a vlogger, if you're doing something quick that is a fast turnaround, you want to burn your color in, you want to shoot it, to publish it, right? You don't want a whole lot of in-between steps. So maybe you're a .mov shooter. Because of firmware 2.0, we're now getting raw HDMI out. Now, I'll preface this that not just raw, but other flavors of recording from third parties like Blackmagic or Atomos, you know, to name a few just off the top of my head in terms of external recording. So that gives you .mov sort of on one side in terms of amount of data that you're sort of crunching. Then you have your now raw HDMI out in the middle. So if you like, you can very soon get Apple ProRes or some less data intensive stuff. I mean, you can shoot all sorts of things on any external recorder. So that's kind of like that middle area. And then all the way over here for really professional high-end cinematography options, for me, I want to shoot as much Cine DNG 12-bit that I can. So that's sort of a wide variety of recording options that you have, honestly.
This honestly feels like an open source camera.
Yeah, and speaking to the open source feel that the FP has, because the software dev kit is now being made available by Sigma Japan, that's allowing gimbals to interface directly with the camera. You hit record, you know, on your small gimbal on the side. And hopefully, as other developers take advantage of having that software available, we'll see all sorts of other cool applications for being able to talk to the camera in a, you know, unique and cool way.
No, it sounds all amazing.
Let's Mark, if you don't mind, let's pop back into maybe Cinemagraph or something in there, because I don't want to blast past Cinemagraphs or any of those color options that you have when you share your screen and show off some of those assets. Because one of the, yeah, okay, so here's a behind the scenes shot here. I mean, you know, true to form, I'm using like 15 lights to light something that's like the size of an apple. And I mean, there's quite a lot going on in this shot, but you can actually kind of see the FP just dead center, kind of near my left shoulder, rigged up in sort of a cine mode. Could I've had better cable management? Maybe, but you see I have an external monitor there. I have a Bebob 150 watt hours, so that's going to last forever. And then I have all sorts of accessories hanging off of that because I'm an absolute nerd. Mark, I don't know if you can play the video file or even show off one of the product images that I was shooting in this set. So a shot of the 3 lenses might be cool to see, or that video file of the sparks behind the FP would be neat too. Actually, oh yeah, I mean, these are all good too.
Yeah, I'm just trying. Here we go. Video of sparks.
So here's some BTS of us filming with Thea.
It's nice to see it from every different angles.
Yeah, you know, this was a small crew, obviously socially distant. We're all wearing masks. We're outside for added safety, but this just shows you the setup.
The mark of a good cinematographer. He can make even any dilapidated back lot look like a stage.
Well, yeah, you can see why I didn't pan left to the abandoned cars there. You know, I'm trying to use the textures that I have access to. So Mark, any other photo?
So just to give Mark some time, we have a really good personal question from Shawan Edward. Apologize if I messed up your name. Looking into your background, it seems that you wear a lot of different hats across all of the productions you're involved with. Was this a conscious choice from the beginning of your career, or was it more of a natural evolution?
Yeah, that's a great question. So is it a natural evolution? I started off very early on, more on the producing side, then almost instantly fell in love with camera because of a budgetary reason. I could never afford to have a B cam on sort of the travel show that I was doing at the time. So I picked up a camera out of necessity. Then I absolutely fell in love with the camera aspect of it, but I didn't want to lose, you know, sort of the producing side. So it's a little bit of a confusing hyphen for people, but you know, my first movie, The Good Catholic, is kind of a good example of this. So it's sold to Netflix back in 2016. I'm both producer, and then my credit is additional cinematography. So I like the flexibility that cinematography allows me, because on Sunday when, you know, I couldn't get the crew to work a 7th day, nor should you, I went out and shot like a majority of the exteriors in the film myself and a PA. And then that, yeah, we got lucky on that movie. That's starring Danny Glover, and it got great distribution at the time. So I like the flexibility of just taking the camera out in the field and doing what I need to do.
Yeah, and I feel like nowadays with the way everything's going, crews are getting smaller. Everyone has to wear multiple hats. Yeah, you're your own cinematographer, your own editor, your own colorist.
Yeah, I mean, I think the unions probably have something to say about wearing multiple hats.
Yeah.
But the point is, especially now, multiple skill sets is important. And really, I'm very limited. I only do anything related to cameras and making of content. Everything else, I have no skills. Cooking, etc. Cool, great question. Mark, do you think we can go back to sharing some of those stills?
Sure.
Because there are some color things I want to mention.
And just FYI, everybody, we have about another 15 minutes or so on the webinar. Please send us some questions so we can answer them.
Yeah, and hang out. There may or may not be some type of promo that is landing.
Oh yeah,
right at the end of this. So
you will be rewarded for your patience.
Okay, so let's go full screen on this, Mark, if you don't mind. Okay, so this is older in terms of the life of the camera color mode. This is Cine. This is a great one too. So this is slightly compressed for purposes of this webinar. But from left to right, you have Cine mode, far left. Again, this is a color mode I picked in camera and just exported and thought, oh, that looks great. Let's just keep that. Middle is teal and orange mode. Talked a little bit about that, but that's teal and orange +1. And then far right, if you want to figure out your color later, that's off. So that just shows you sort of the variety. And honestly, I personally like that previous image a lot. I think Cine mode looked really cool. It really worked with the grain. I would be totally fine publishing that or submitting that as a professional example of my work. I also like teal and orange, the middle one, but it doesn't have quite as much interaction with the fields of grain, whatever you want to call it. So Mark, let's, yeah, there you go. So that's full screen on off mode. And then Mark, maybe you can keep cooking. So this is me using the director viewfinder sort of setup. Sigma also makes an accessory that's like a handle that you might want to put underneath if you like that. For me, this is almost my preferred way of operating the FP for documentary stuff. I mean, look at me. Can you tell that I'm shooting 12-bit RAW here? No, which has some advantages. I'm going to say always get a permit, but in case you don't have a permit, do I look like I'm shooting 12-bit RAW professional images?
No, you look like a photographer.
I'm just a guy. Just a guy on the street, which, you know, as journalists and members of the press more often, you know, documentary filmmakers, as we become targets, I am much more preferring small cameras as things get crazy. And you know, Sigma obviously playing well with third parties here. I believe this is a Panavized 12mm lens. I don't remember at the time, but I'm using the MC31 here to be able to use that PL mount. Okay, Mark, I think we can skip ahead. Okay, yep, I looked at that.
You want to go back?
All good with the graphs. I think we can move past the graphs, yeah.
We got a great question from a Catherine Sheldon. Maybe some relation?
Catherine Sheldon.
Yeah. How does this camera compare to other popular mirrorless cameras? For example, she uses a Sony a7R III as a secondary camera or gimbal camera and as a companion to her FS7.
I don't have a Catherine in the family, but Brooklyn-based EP. Are we related, Catherine? Send me a message later on Instagram, and we'll go down the rabbit hole there. Two other popular mirrorless cameras. I use a Sony a7R III, second cam gimbal as a companion to my FS7. How does it compare? I would not want to go head-to-head necessarily. I got to be a little bit careful. I can't be like, it's infinitely better. You're going to love it. The things I would have you look at is look at the spec sheet for the A7R III, look at the FP, look at video mode, Catherine. Yeah. Are you getting 12-bit raw full-frame images at this price point? Yeah. I don't think you are.
And you record to an SSD?
And recording to an SSD, or are you getting 120 frames per second full HD 10-bit? I also don't think you are, without being an expert on that camera. Yeah. And then you also have access to all of your glass you could possibly want, at least most of it, using MC21, MC31 adapter, or there's other third-party adapters that allow you to go to other mounts that I'm not naming that you might also like. In terms of the FP as a second camera, I'm a huge believer in that. I personally, talking about use cases for a moment with the FP, I use the FP as a, I don't like the word crash cam because an engineer spends a few years making a gorgeous camera and then you put it next to a car chase or you try to set fire to it. But the image is so much more superior than like action, things that are action cams, right? And if we can go full screen, Mark, if you don't mind killing that for a second. I actually like this shot. This is some balloons here. But if you take the cage off of this, this is incredibly small. So why would you ever use any other different kind of action cam? You can mount this anywhere. It's 0.46 pounds. You can stick it on the handlebars. It's easy to balance on a gimbal. And you can put it near the car chase without worrying that, you know, you'll never recover financially if something happened. Easy insurance payout too. So for me, I use it as an A cam, absolutely. But as a second cam, pairing well with other manufacturers' color science, which is I think what you're asking, things like FS7, Cinema DNG files, if you've never had a chance to grade the video version of that, beautiful flavor of RAW, incredibly gradable, very easy to make it, you know, look like another camera. When in doubt, you know, roll a few seconds on a color chart or something at the beginning if you're really nervous about it at all. But it grades very well and plays well with other camera brands all the time. In fact, on that Warner Brothers project, I was editing the FP intermingled with Canon and Red. So there you have it. You have it. Let's see.
Do we have any other questions from anyone else?
Maybe while we're waiting on some more questions, and then you, Catherine, you tell me if I failed utterly at answering that. But I want to make sure. So firmware 2.0, extremely big deal because there were a few quality of life changes. So if you were sort of on the fence about the FP prior to firmware 2.0, there were little things, right? You couldn't play back Cine DNG video files in camera prior to 2.0, which was released just about a month ago. Okay, that's obviously a big one. You can shoot HDR in .mov now with 2.0. You can, I've already mentioned HDMI raw output, huge deal. Again, this is all recent stuff. Huge deal for playing well with external recorders. Stills being pulled out of director's viewfinder mode. I've talked about this, key when communicating to other team members. Off, color mode off. Your images are on the way to being as flat as they possibly can be. Dual base ISO. I mean, we already talked about why that's awesome. Improved autofocus performance. Not something I use too much as a cinematographer, but you know, Mark, I'm sure you do.
Yep.
And then for our European friends, you get 25 frames per second now. Gosh, almost too many. Time code generation. Right? So if you have 5 FPs on set, you now can sync everything up in post using timecode. I mean, just such a huge, I mean, maybe we can put in the comments sort of the whole list of improvements, but it was just such a big deal.
Speaking of timecode, John E. Gustafson just asked, I'm thinking about using the FP for a micro budget feature. Can you explain how timecode sync works with it on this camera? Can you jam sync it and then have the FP record scratch sound?
Great question, John. I don't want to answer that fully because this has just been a few weeks as I said, I've shot a couple features and this is right in the middle of quarantine. So I haven't shot any features recently. And the other reason why it's tricky for me to answer is I'm never responsible on large sets for time code. That's always some combination of the assistant camera team and the audio team. So unfortunately, you know, you can absolutely use something like a tentacle to go into that audio jack. But in terms of also getting scratch, I'm not sure of the best solution there. You could go out of the monitor, I guess. No, see, I'm making stuff up and proving that I'm not the guy.
I guess, like I've done this on a few weddings, like take a few Rode wireless Go's, put one in the camera and one goes into the house feed. So that could be, you know, one way of syncing audio, getting good audio for safety in the camera.
Yeah, that's a good point. But, you know, and also how we used to make movies, we didn't record scratch. So you could also just, you know, clap slate and make sure that you're just crushing that and get that into into your mixer as well. So then you have time code for a gut check, and then you have a good person doing the slates, and you're just sort of militant about that. I think would be absolutely a good option. So yeah, I need to generate some time code is what I'm hearing from you, John. Okay, let's see. Mark, you want to pull up a couple more questions here as people come up with any additional questions you might have about the FP or filmmaking in general,
So it appears that you've actually hit everybody's questions so far.
Yeah, you want to pull up, share your screen again? Did I miss? Maybe show the sparks flying behind or a couple of the cinemagraphs we missed. I would really love to show those.
Hey, Mark, since you're an avid photographer, you want to talk about the photography features of the Sigma FP and how you've worked with it?
Well, I mean, again, so it's been a little difficult with quarantine, but just prior to quarantine, I actually was down at the Golden Knights training camp, which is the Army Rangers paratroopers. And I spent a couple of days with the guys while they jumped out of planes, and I actually did some stills and video from the ground and from the air with them. I also managed to take one of the guys, and we mounted 2 FPs to his helmet. So I've got a little bit of footage from him stepping out of the plane at 21,000 feet, videoing back of doing video of the guys as they step out doing formations. So I've got to play around with it. I'm not happy with my output because as a still photographer of 40 plus years, cinematography has been kind of new to me. And actually, Graham has been kind of inspiring in that respect for me. So I'm starting to learn the editing end of things and learning a whole different world. So it's interesting. And like you're saying, playing with the color grading and actually changing exposures a little bit after the fact, which is kind of not an easy task when you don't know what you're doing, but it forces you to learn a little bit more and get it right the first time. So, and experimenting with lenses that are focused by wire as opposed to hypersonic motors, which is, again, a very different focus system. But having the range of ability to shoot from ISO 6 to ISO 100,000 and the stuff at ISO 100,000 is actually usable. Usually you would be like, there's no way. I've got some images that I've got created that I just couldn't believe that I did. I did one at ISO 80,000 of a dog sitting behind a counter in a store in a total shadow. And it's a dynamite image, which I wish I could share it with you at the moment, but I'm on a different computer, so I don't have access to it. But the detail, I mean, down to the balls of moisture on his tongue and the sweat on his nose. There's no loss of detail. It's incredible. There's a wish list of a few things that I would love to see, but it's a very unique tool that I'm starting to work with, and I'm looking forward to creating more with it. So having the ability to throw on countless lenses, and even with the 45 millimeter that it comes with as a kit, doing street photography. I did a grab shot the other day driving through downtown Brooklyn of some graffiti that was on a wall while I was at a stoplight. And you could see every nook and cranny of the bricks and the paint and the splatter from 40 feet away. And it was a simple f5.6.
Nice.
So it's just mind-bending what we can do with the camera so far. So, I like building a little bit of content to share back with you, and then you can actually post some images from the still side. But having the high frame rate and having the ability to shoot some video along with the stills and flip the switch and go back and forth is actually kind of a really cool thing. And for the customers out there that are listening, to step on both sides of the fence with the flip of the switch, you actually, when you look at the GUI on the back of the camera and compare what you're seeing, there are some subtle differences, but they actually translate to the same thing. So it's basically the same information, just in a different section of the screen. So the biggest addition is actually watching the countdown clock, which is actually a huge help because it's generating that kind of time code where if I've got to go back in and section in another piece of video where I messed up and I need to go back and fix something, it makes it easy for me to know where to cut in and cut out a piece of video. So for argument's sake, I created an instructional video using my FP, and you know, when you see a finished product, it's kind of it's in your mind that, oh, they did this, you know, 5-minute video, they did it in 20 minutes. Not the case. Ruprecht the Monkey Boy took 198 takes to do a 5-minute video. So, and I had to go back and cut in pieces of stuff that where I screwed up. So rather than start from scratch and read my script over and get back on point, I learned quickly that I could actually just stop, a second or two of dead air, and then cut in where I needed to, and then add the clip that I screwed up, and then continue talking. So there was, beside that little bit of learning curve, I'm stepping on both sides of the fence.
Yes.
So it's really kind of cool.
I think Mark just learned J&L cuts.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we have a really good question from John Gustafson once more. He says, I do a lot of aerial photography from helicopters here in Iceland, especially when a volcano erupts. Ideally, I want to do a video and stills on the same flights. Can I do them at the same time? Can I pull quality stills from a cinema DNG video?
Yes, this is the exact, I mean, look, weirdly, John, you found the exact camera for helicopter volcano eruptions.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, this is like a great use case. So can I pull quality stills from a Cine DNG video? Absolutely. Yes. Depending on the motion of the helicopter, keep in mind your shutter, right?
Electronic shutter, so.
Yeah, so you want to be freezing motion however you want to be on a creative level. I'm not sure how close you're getting to this like lava explosions, right? But keep that in mind because you do 1/48 shutter if you're shooting 23:9:8. But for something like this, I would just crank the data and do 120 frames per second, 10-bit, full HD, Cine DNG. And then, yeah, I mean, you fly past the volcano, and then on your way back to Reykjavik, you can start pulling stuff from your...
What are the resolution of the stills?
Either UHD, well, yeah, so you're not using the entire sensor, but I mean, UHD photo.
Yeah.
Right. So, and I'm guessing that John is also shooting his still camera on a gyroscope while he's in the helicopter to eliminate the vibration of what he's doing, as most aerial photographers do. But, again, frame rate and everything else like that, you're probably pretty good. The nice thing about putting this onto that gyroscope is you're eliminating like 40% of the weight that you're used to holding up there because the camera's so small. So that's going to help steady yourself out and do stuff as well. And keep in mind that if you're doing print work from any of the stills, you need 2 megapixels to make an 8x10. So even if you're not shooting with the full sensor and you're only shooting with 10 megapixels worth of information, you're still able to do a pretty large print, natively out of the camera. And then Photoshop or whatever to interpolate it to billboard size should you need. So
that was a really good question.
Yeah.
I know. I'm honestly really jealous. Like I wish I could be doing
I'm telling you
right now.
I want to head to Iceland and join them and do that.
All right. So it's about the 5 o'clock mark. So I think, Mark, can you pull up the special that we have for today's attendees?
I certainly can. Just change screens here for a second. There we go. There we go. And go back to share screen.
John says we don't let Americans on the island at the moment.
All right.
Thanks, John.
You won't be the only one.
One day I will film volcanoes in the helicopter on the other side, and we'll try not to get in each other's shot.
So actually, I can't get back to sharing my other screen.
Oh, well.
Graham went way large on the screen there.
So I'll just say it.
Yes. Well, go ahead.
Today and for tomorrow, today's the 23rd, tomorrow's the 24th. If you order a Sigma lens, there is a special instant rebate. So if you'd like to take advantage of that special, please contact us at sales@photocare.com or call the store in, and we'll be able to take care of you. In the chat window, I've put up our emails as well. There you go.
Nice.
$25 and $50 off.
Yes.
And Manny, you're at Phase 4 in New York, right? So people
Correct.
can go into PhotoCare and try out the Sigma FP soon, now?
Sooner rather than later.
All right, well, sooner rather than later. Cool, and that's my face on a coupon. Dream achieved. Thank you, PhotoCare, and thank you, Sigma.
Yes. Yes.
So special ends tomorrow. And and thank you, Graham and Mark, for an awesome webinar, very informative. We have an Alpa webinar for our technical photography enthusiasts, Tuesday, August 4th. Please visit our PhotoCare events page to sign up. It's free. I'm sure everyone will love to learn more about Alpa, and which is pretty hard to get information on, surprisingly, in New York. Well, we're one of the few stores in New York that actually take advantage of that. So thank you once again, everyone, for joining us. We appreciate it. And this is the end of the webinar.
Thanks,
Take care, guys.
everybody.
All right. Thanks for joining us, everybody.
Be safe out there.